Welcome to Fire Mountain, episode 8.
Episode 8. And can I just say, watching that bumper right then, makes me realise we need to get a new wardrobe.
I mean,
it feels like we just wear different versions of black tops with caps.
It's exactly
basically
what's going on. I thought you're saying, watching that bumper, we need to go back to the old bumper. I think we should bring back the old bumper.
No way. How did the old bumper go?
Hold on.
That's it. Oh.
Come on.
Gosh. No.
You know.
I'm pleased those days are behind us.
You know you prefer that old bumper. You know you do. It's amazing. So good to have you join us. A lot has been happening.
Oh, my word.
That we're going to get into.
Yeah.
And today may feel a little bit more serious as we're kind of pushing forward. But as always, if you've got questions, comments, things you want to say, please do drop them down into the comments section. We will bring them up and read them out. Or email us at firemountain@sunnyhill.church.
Yeah.
Half term, how's your half term been, Dom?
Half term has been great, thanks. We went away to Torquay for the first part of it.
Amazing.
Living the dream in Barbados with the in-laws.
Would we say Barbados?
Mate, it's called the English Riviera,
Really?
which kind of just speaks to the quality and magnitude of such a place.
Would you be saying more the downtown Riviera?
I like it.
Not this nice part of the Riviera, like the other part of the Riviera, where the people who work in the Riviera
Where did you grow up again, Richard?
I mean, I grew up in a place that is magical, a land of magic and wonder. It's a wonder you've survived.
Yeah, wonder you survived. Yeah, but no, we had a great half term. How was your half term?
My half term was really, really good.
Good.
Tank Museum with the kids. If you haven't been to the Tank Museum, we're not sponsored.
No, we're not.
Tank Museum.
We're not sponsored.
Hey,
maybe.
Who knows? Definitely worth taking a trip to. Really enjoyed that and kind of just had them hanging out.
Well, you were saying about the Tank Museum that they've got a whole area designated to World War II kind of history. And talking of World War II, obviously this week has been pretty wild, hasn't it?
Dude.
Like with everything happening in Ukraine.
Crazy.
Or the conflict with Russia. We need to talk about that today. We
Yeah.
need to give some serious time to talk about what's happening there.
Yeah, we are. We're going to get into it, and it may mean that this episode feels a little bit more less jovial, maybe. And I
Yeah.
say that after last week,
Yeah.
which was just
Which is just so exciting. Talking about pornography.
But
yeah.
I mean, it's going to be one of those episodes. We wanted to talk about it, and we've been kind of going a little bit back and forth about some of our thoughts around what's happening in the world. It just seems like such a crazy thing.
Well, it's kind of like, you know, in Britain anyways, in England, obviously we're moving out of the phase of the COVID measures and now where everything is pretty much gone. Nothing now is mandatory. You don't even have to self-isolate if you get coronavirus, which I just think is pretty interesting, isn't it? And I saw quite a funny meme. I don't think I've got it on here, but it's like, it's of David Brent in The Office where he's like saying, oh, back to normality. And then like his lingering date in the background with Putin's name underneath. This idea that like he didn't realise that Putin's just round the corner about to kind of ruin any scope of normality that we were hoping for. And so, you know, we don't want to underplay this thing because it's a serious issue that we've got on European territory. So we need to talk about that and pray about that today for sure.
And it feel like it ramped up so quickly. Like literally I woke, like it was kind of like you wake up and all of a sudden my news feed's just all the time.
Yeah, well, I think just leveling with you and with people, I think I underestimated how serious it was. I think my humble opinion was it was probably a smoke screen. Like looking at this conflict with Russia just distracted us from other things domestically, things that we need to address domestically. But obviously, if what the news is saying is true, then obviously Russia is at war with Ukraine and therefore all NATO countries. So pretty challenging.
Well, before we get into it, we're going to quickly go into a song by the guys from our Next Gen department who kind of put together this video during lockdown. So, man, it's been a while. It's called So Will I. So we hope you guys...
Great song to worship to this morning as we kind of think about this whole idea. Because regardless of what's happening on in the world, God is worthy of everything we can offer, right? All of our worship and praise. And that's what this song really captures. So be blessed by it.
Start before the beginning of time.
That sounds quite quiet. It will build up.
With no point of reference, flashed out the wonder of light.
So we're doing worship hours after this.
Yeah. We come out of this.
And as you speak, 100 billion galaxies are born. In the vapor of your breath, the planets born. If the stars are made to worship so alive, I can see your heart in everything you made. Every burning star signify your grace. If creation sings your praises so alive. God of your promise, you don't speak in vain, no syllable empty or void. For once you have spoken, all nature and science follow the sound of your voice. Oh, and as you speak, 100 billion creatures catch your breath, evolving in pursuit of what you say. If it all reveals your nature so alive, I can see your heart in everything you say. Every painted sky, a canvas of your grace. If creation still obeys you so
This is crazy. Like, you know what I mean? You got, you can feel
if the stars were made to worship so alive, if the mountains bow in reverence so alive, if the oceans roar your greatness so alive, if we're everything it takes to lift you high so alive, if the wind goes where you sadness so alive, if the rocks cry out in silence so alive, if the sun of all our praises still falls shy, then we'll sing again 100 billion times. God of salvation, you chased down my heart through all of my failures and pride.
Did you watch that?
On a hill you created, the light of the world, abandoned in darkness to die. As you speak, 100 billion failures disappear. When you lost your life, so I can find it. If you left the grave behind,
Thanks for leading us in that song, Next Gen. And last night they had Resound Youth Event, which I heard was great.
Amazing.
Some source. But let's just pray for a moment.
Yeah.
Lots to pray about, and I think we'll pray at the end of the broadcast today.
Yeah.
But Father God, we just thank you, Lord, that in spite of all things that we're seeing in the world, Lord, you are sovereign.
Yeah.
And you are in control, Lord, even when it doesn't make sense. And I just pray that over the next 45 minutes to an hour, Lord, that you would just direct our conversation and help us to really just unpack and uncover things that will encourage and edify us, Lord God, as we seek to pray into this conflict and know what to think about it all. So God, in these next few moments, be with us in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
But before we get too heavy
Yes.
with a conversation, this is still Fire Mountain, which means that we still have to kind of enjoy a measure of joviality,
Yeah,
right?
we do.
Is
We
joviality a word? If it's not, it
If
should
it's not,
be. It's a
we'll
great
make it.
word.
Joviality.
Joviality. We still want to kind of have a bit of fun. But like, you know, one of the segments that we introduced a couple of weeks ago, we didn't do last week because we didn't think it really lended itself to the topic we were talking about. But this week obviously lends itself a lot more.
Yeah, exactly.
Is worship fails. Now, let me just kind of just say this up front, that the reason I like videos that go wrong in other churches is because it happens to us all the time at Sunny Hill, but we don't always capture it on camera. And I think there's something cool. Like, the church is our people.
Yeah.
Like, we are the church. So I think when we see stuff that's funny that happens in the church, we shouldn't try and hide it away and bury the footage and the evidence.
No.
We should be going, look how funny this is. And so we got a couple of funny videos today that kind of just show the funniness of what church can be.
So because I built a bumper, I'm running the bumper. There we go.
That's a beautiful bumper. The car that fails to start. There we go. That sounds like my
that was
car.
the bumper. It was pretty. It's pretty lame.
That sounds like my car, to be honest.
Okay, here we go. Number 1.
Okay, let's see it. Oh, this is brilliant. Check this guy out. So this guy is leading a live worship set from home, and his dad trying to get out of the house. And this guy just carries on. Mate, that is mental. And his dad trying to get to the door.
What's happening? His dad lost.
I'm surprised that, like, you know, the son didn't say, Dad, I'm filming for the next hour. You need to show that again. That is genius. Look at him try not to laugh.
Wait, here we go.
Here we go. Let's see it again.
Worryingly, that looks a bit like Louise, your wife's dad.
I think I say. Oh, if he's watching, he's going to be a bigger version, yeah. But yeah, you know, well, we've all had Zoom meetings like that, right? Where kids have been kind of just off camera or trying not to be seen and stuff.
Man, absolutely.
That is so funny, isn't it?
That's great.
So obviously that goes a throwback to the days where we were leading worship live at home and stuff. So that was interesting. I like that one. What's the next one you got for us? Oh, right. So before you play it, I need to explain.
Okay.
There's a couple of videos, right? Now, when you are live mixing footage on a Sunday, you kind of have camera 1, camera 2, camera 3.
Yeah.
Right? And sometimes, if the person who should be cutting and splicing those cameras together is a bit like distracted or is doing something else, it means that they are looking at the wrong. You're not enjoying like this right now. So I'm talking, but the camera's on the wrong subject, right? That happens all the time when you're broadcasting church, because hey, most people who are doing it aren't paid to do it. And so we've got a couple of videos where it shows this brilliantly, and they've got a woman singing, but you're seeing a man. You're seeing a man on camera, and it makes me laugh. Amazing. See, in that video, you don't even see the woman. It just looks like he is the only one singing. But the next one, I think, is even better.
Okay, here we go.
Check this out. No, not that one. Not that one.
This one.
My
bad.
Here we go. This is brilliant.
Surrounded by a great cloud of witnesses, we walk by faith and not by
And then eventually the memo
sight.
gets to the producer at the back.
From every
And he's trying to
tribe
discover.
and tongue,
There we go.
and every
There she
There
is.
we go.
There's the singer.
You know what I love about this one? I'm going to click it in again and just look at how big this church is. I mean, their setup is ridiculous.
Happens to the best of us. Happens to the best of us.
Look at that. Like, they've got cubes hanging down, a massive cross. Here we go.
surrounded by a great
And you can just see someone with earphones on going, yeah, this is good. Good TV, guys. Great TV right now.
I think that is such a good video. That's brilliant, isn't it?
Okay, this one is really, really good. Here we go.
It's a word slip.
Listen to that again in case you missed it.
So why should my butt
That's so funny. And I mean, like, I do that stuff all the time. I think I said a couple of weeks ago how I've been in countless occasions where I lead worship and I jumble the words up. Or like Louise, when she sings Waymaker, she always sings Maywaker.
Maywaker.
She always gets those letters mixed up. But I think this is the funniest version of a song where you can get "Why should my fart here" instead of "heart fear." I think that. Play it one more time. That's a good one.
So why should my butt here? So why should my butt here?
There we go. I think he has a note. I think he notices as well because he smiles a bit, doesn't he? He's like, "It's all good."
All right. Can I go back?
It's like I told you, didn't I, about the wedding I led worship a few years ago, and we were singing "Lost in Wonder." And I just end up singing "Lost in London," just because I'd sung it that way for fun so often that like when push came to shove, I accidentally sung the wrong words and ruined the whole day for them.
So we got one last one that you found, but you're gonna have to set it up. It's got Mr. Bean in it, but you're gonna have to set it up. It's really, really good.
Okay, so one of my favourite things from London Olympics 2012 was the bit where Rowan Atkinson was on the keyboard playing Chariots of Fire with the orchestra. I think Sir Simon Rattle was conducting. And anyway, he's on his keyboard at the back. And in the Chariots of Fire, there's that kind of constant... And so the video was him doing that throughout the orchestra song and getting really bored doing it. Well, there's another song that we sing, one of the Hill songs. I can't remember what it's called. And it's kind of funny because someone has edited that video over that Hill song. Because, again, there's one of those repetitive kind of... So play it, and it's kind of funny. His face is amazing. I've literally felt like that as a keyboarder at church. I think, you know, when I'm preaching and I get a keyboarder up to play out the last 10 minutes, that's what I feel they feel like.
Oh,
it's
really?
just like, get me a seat, somebody.
You know, normally they're coming up and we're saying to them, it's about 2 minutes to go. You should hit the stage. And then they get up there and it's about another 23 minutes of them just playing.
That's so funny, man. That's so funny. But no, I just like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. Really
that's so good. Well,
on to the serious stuff now.
War. What is it good for?
Absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
Unless you can benefit financially from it.
From it, yeah. That's true.
Which wars are quite profitable, to be fair.
So, on the plus side, I learned a new word.
I think oligarch. On the plus side. War. On the plus side. What's the plus side?
No. I'm just saying, on the plus side, I've learned a new word.
Oligarch.
Coming out of all of this.
Okay.
Oligarch, which I never knew existed.
Okay. The funny thing is, when I think of a profile of an oligarch, I picture your kind of face. I think it's the beard. It's that czar kind of like oligarch.
I've set myself up. I just to decide which side I want to be on, depending on how this goes.
So what is an oligarch then, for those watching?
So, I mean, from my limited understanding, it's not a gargoyle.
Yeah.
What an oligarch, because that's what I thought first when I heard it.
Yeah.
It's basically somebody who is financially benefiting by what Russia's doing. So these really rich financial people who have been feeding money into the Kremlin.
Okay.
And like looking and going, by Russia making these moves into the Ukraine and kind of pushing ahead with it, they're going to have massive financial benefit coming out of it. And so kind of what these on the side billionaire type supporters. Really
so I always thought oligarch was somebody who was one of the wealthiest people, like the wealthiest elite out of Russia.
Yeah.
And I thought probably were influential, but it's actually directly related to profiteering from.
You could well be right, but at the moment they're talking about all the names that they're putting out are people who will directly be profiting.
Yeah,
from what's going
on that, because like obviously there's been a whole heap of sanctions that has come from the West, so from the UK and from Britain and from Europe, sanctions to try and in a diplomatic attempt to kind of neutralize this war, to kind of bring it to nothing. And one of them has been sanctioning 3 of the primary oligarchs in the UK, right? Yeah. to stop them from profiteering from UK economy, is it? Or what is it exactly?
I mean, it's a really good question. I don't really fully understand how it works, but it feels like their own self-interests are best served by Russia going to war. So it kind of feels to me a bit like, let's say you owned a big defense company.
Yeah.
And you were then beginning to pay money into political parties to ensure that they went into war because you're going to get more defense contracts. That's what I kind of
Which happens all the time, by the way, in America.
Yeah, yeah.
At least.
I mean, only in America.
Only in America. Always in America.
Yeah.
You know, we had a girl from America on Sunday come, and I had to apologise because I'm always cussing Americans. Always. So I was like, I think they're all right, really. I said, it's just that, you know, it's just those West Coasters, isn't it? It's like the LA people. And I said, so where are you from? And she's like, near Los Angeles. She's like, San Diego area. I was like, hey, okay. All are welcome. I should just keep cussing the Welsh and Scottish instead. You know, avoid Americans.
Did Hillary Clinton come over to yours?
Oh my gosh! If Hillary, I would offer a glass of water actually, because the Bible tells me to, but not because I want to have any kind of association. But you know, it's kind of an interesting thing. I mean, I think we just need to give a bit of a backdrop because not that we assume that our audience are dumb or anything like that, but it's kind of confusing. Why are we even at this point?
Yeah.
Why is Russia now invading Ukraine, and why do Russia see it as their right to do so?
Yeah.
And you know, so I mean, do you want to give us a high level view? I mean, I'm happy to help as well to paint a picture.
I can give as high a level as from what I understand, having gleaned various sources. Yeah. From my understanding, it's kind of a historic conflict. Yeah. That kind of really began in 1991, where the Ukraine declared sovereignty. The USSR was split up at the fall of the Berlin Wall, and Ukraine became a sovereign nation where they wanted to govern themselves, still with close connections, though, to Russia. So kind of like Russia's their big brother, kind of like watching over them and helping them, but they're operating as an independent country. In about 2013, there was some aid requirements that were needed, and what happened is that Ukrainian president at the time had put out a referendum, and they were trying to make this decision to see if they were going to go into the kind of Eastern European bloc for help or go to the Western European side. Okay. So if you kind of picture the map of Europe, you've got Russia here, you've got like France, Germany, Poland, all of these countries here, and in the middle of the two nearly, you've got the Ukraine situated. Yeah. At this point, the president then decided that he would push to Russia for help. Yeah. That created a massive kind of uprising inside of the Ukraine. He was eventually overthrown. A new president came in who then pushed to go, we want to connect more with the Western European side of Europe and kind of really begin to unfold there, which kind of began this big divide between Russia and the Ukraine. With the eastern side of the Ukraine, I mean, this is really limited. I feel like I'm butchering history in a big way right now.
Well, I'm pleased it's you and not me for a change, so that's good.
So with the Eastern European kind of side of it, this Donbass region. Okay. The two of them, separatists rebels took over these two little like areas inside of this region, and they want to more align with Russia. Yeah. And are busy saying that the Ukraine is oppressing them and kind of attacking them. Yeah. And so that kind of is the backdrop
so basically
to where things are at. So
Putin is laying claim to the territory of Ukraine because he say it's Soviet territory. It once was Russia. Yeah. Integral to Russia. Yeah. One of the biggest cities. Yeah. Kiev, obviously. Yeah. They reckon that was like the second capital of Russia, right? Yeah. And actually a very rich and fertile land. Yeah. Like it's actually massive as well. Ukraine is bigger than lots of people realise.
25 million people live there.
I think it's more than that.
Oh, I thought it was 25 million.
I think it's like 44 million people live there. Wow. I think. Well, let's just. I'm going to get some data up.
Yeah. Okay. Jump online.
I think it's bigger than that.
So while you are, if you watched the press conference that. So Putin did like a 65-minute kind of press presentation. Yeah. And in that press presentation, he basically, in a sense, rewrote history and said what happened in 1991 wasn't like valid. Yeah. So in a sense, it's kind of going, you can't invade a country you own. Yeah. and nearly kind of undermining the sovereignty.
Well, I think
of,
isn't
of
the
it.
segregation of Ukraine and Russia? It's older than 91, right? It dates back to the early 1900s, right?
Yeah.
I think that there's a
yeah.
kind of dispute around territories and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But in 1991, it was
When it's
recognised as a sovereign state. But yeah, it's 43,466,819 people. So that is the population as of 2021.
Wow.
Although it does say there 2022. Although lots of people are now doing the exodus out of this place. But that's a massive population, isn't it? And also, when you look at their economy, they're an amazing economy. They're quite a good economy. But actually, the land is just rich with minerals. So I was reading this morning on a Facebook post, actually, I think that was put up by Helen Goldenberg, I think, whose sister-in-law is Ukrainian. Let me just find it. It's kind of interesting. That it's first in Europe for proven recoverable reserves of uranium ores. So the most uranium deposits are found in Ukraine. Second place in Europe for titanium ore.
Wow.
Okay. Second place in world terms of explored reserves for manganese ores. So loads of precious metals, basically. Second largest iron ore reserves. Second place in Europe for mercury reserves. Third place in Europe for shale gas reserves. And fourth in the world for the value of natural resources. Seventh in the world for coal reserves. So you can see why Putin may be wanting that territory. But still, so let me just level with you, right? Because this may be where I get like cancelled once and for all. Is that I don't even know what I should and shouldn't say.
Are you saying out of all the crazy you say, this could well be the craziest?
This could be the thing that
gets
gets me cancelled, right? Is that historically I've never been anti-Putin, in the sense that I think he's more of an authoritarian ruler. I think that's what Russia have had historically, really.
Yeah.
So it's not someone I would want leading the UK. But I've always found, from what I've seen in the media, is that when there's G20 summits, he's always attending these things and he's in proximity to world leaders, because I think there's this aspiration in him to be associated with the global forces of the world, to be in the elite, whatever. But I think there is this kind of I don't know, I think the way we paint him, to say he's done him a misservice, I don't know him, do I? And I don't know, so I'm not going to say that. But I think certainly what we've kind of done through our media is it's us and them. It's always had this kind of we have nothing in common really with them, and therefore we can't really trust them, and their spies are trying to poison us and all this. And I don't know enough really to say, no, Putin's a really nice guy. But obviously for me, this whole Ukraine venture, I think, before I start looking into it, I'm trying to just picture if someone, say, took Dorset, let's say we went to war and then someone recognised Dorset's sovereignty, that I would still feel there's a claim to be had, there's a dispute here. Can Dorset just go, we want to be independent from the United Kingdom? Can they do that? So obviously I'm not supporting Russia's invasion of Ukraine, far from it. But you've got to try and understand what is the context of this, because you can't really address it unless you understand it. You can't really pray into it effectively without understanding that actually many Russians feel hard done by about what happened in the fall of the Berlin Wall. That said, obviously invasion isn't ever good and appropriate, especially when it's recognised as a sovereign state. It means that this decision has been made, and it'd be like us trying to reclaim India as part of the British colony. It's ridiculous. We can't do that. But obviously you can see why there may be a dormant resentment and bitterness about the fact that Ukraine are shifting towards the West, and partnering up with NATO, which makes them more secure. So I mean, not that I know a lot, but I assume Putin was trying to kind of jump the gun before any of those official alliances happened in terms of joining NATO and stuff.
Yeah, so I think that the NATO thing is interesting. I was listening to the chief political editor of Al Jazeera News. I mean, not mainstream media.
Well,
so
I think
we're flipping around.
I don't think Al Jazeera is bad. I think Yeah, we'll get onto that in a minute.
We get onto that.
We'll get
but
onto that.
anyway, so we're flipping around here. You're looking at BBC, and I'm going down a route that I really probably am going, do I really want to read this? I don't know. But what I did think was interesting is his take on when they asked him what was he thinking was going on, is he said, Ukraine is like a smoke screen. What this is really about is Putin not wanting NATO to encroach any closer into the eastern kind of bloc of Europe, and really wanting to set up these kind of three big kind of super powerful conversations, like the Asian bloc, probably really dominated by China. Then you've got this kind of NATO allied bloc, probably dominated by America, and then trying to get back to kind of that USSR kind of idea where there's this Eastern European bloc really dominated by Russia, and they're all three are of main players on the world stage of equal standing. And he's going, Ukraine is just a smokescreen to try and make that conversation start to happen. Kind of trying to reach a point where the closer NATO gets in and starts surrounding Russia, eventually all of these extra Russian states around it could potentially fold into NATO and really weaken Russia's kind of global position. So I thought that was an interesting take on the NATO angle of what's really kind of going on. And who knows? Like, who knows?
Well, I think, like you say, who knows? Like, and I think that's a big concern of mine, is like, because I don't trust legacy media, like the primary media outlet. So I don't believe anything they say, that's not true. But like if I read BBC or Sky News, I'm aware that there are multiple agendas at play that are informing the news they're reporting. So they're quite selective in the stuff they want to put out to the British public. And so even this, I'm kind of like, because I had such little confidence in their reporting of COVID, right? Literally such little confidence on it. I think they were just trying to sell news and sell advertisement blocks. And so fear sells. So they were, throwing us into hysteria and all that kind of stuff. It means now that when there is an imminent crisis in Europe, I don't have the confidence to look at their source, like BBC, and go, yes, this must be absolutely what's happening on the ground. So I find that a real challenge and a struggle, because it's kind of like, well, what do I do? Because like, if so I think we've got that kind of crisis happening, and also, it's like, how do I say this? And I'm mindful that, like, because we don't script this, we just kind of talk and roll the cameras, it can kind of shoot us in the foot. Is like, why do we always decide that we're the good guys in every conflict and every problem, the ones who will come in and run in and resolve the issue, when actually recent history suggests that actually we may have got that wrong a few times. There's this funny kind of sketch in the Mitchell and Webb show, I don't know if you've seen it, and there's these two Nazi kind of SS troops, like, just strategizing, and like one of them turns like to each other and notices there's a skull and crossbones on their hat, and he goes, Fitz, or whatever he calls him, he says, Fitz, have you ever wondered if we're the bad guys? Looking at the fact there's a skull and crossbones on their cap, like, and that's kind of interesting, because when these SS troops, they thought they were the good ones. And this is the challenge, is like, you've got Russia's agenda, who think they're the good guys. They don't think they're bad guys. They just think they're reclaiming what's theirs. You've got Ukraine, who no doubt feel like the victims and the good guys and the ones who are unable to defend themselves completely against Russia. And then the West, that always think we have the moral high ground, and because we're the true democratic societies in theory, that we have the right to intervene in almost any conflict we want to establish peace on our terms. And I just feel at times like we're all human. We're all messed up, and we all have our own agendas. So what do you do with that? Like, I don't know whether you've got any thoughts on that.
So I think what you're saying is interesting, and I think this is where political ideology begins to dictate a lot of understanding. So from my viewpoint, I fundamentally believe that democracy will create peace. So the more democratic countries are, the more peace will unfold. So hardly ever do you see democratic countries going to war with each other. But you do see more dictatorship, authoritarian-driven countries. And I know we've had debate over isn't Russia a democratic country or not?
In theory.
But maybe more authoritarian democracy than
Yeah.
democracy. I don't really know if that's a real
Autocracy.
thing. Like an autocracy, yeah.
Yeah.
Like, and so it's really strange because then when I filter what you're saying through that, I have a massive presupposition in my mind, which is democracy is the best. Everybody in the world should live under a democratic system. And if everyone in the world was under a democratic system, then there would be peace
Yes.
across the world. And like, I'm sure there'll be multitudes of people who'd go, that's a ridiculous idea. And how do you know, it's all just about money or power or oil. Thank you, George Bush. Whatever that could be. Or just absolute craziness, Donald Trump.
Well, yeah, you should put. I've got this funny quote, Winston Churchill. Look at this. Democracy is the worst form of government except for all the others that have been tried. Let me be at Churchill. Democracy is the worst form of government except for all the others that have been tried. So I agree. Sorry, have you finished your line of thinking?
So all I'm saying is, I was thinking when it comes to this moral decision of who's right or who's wrong, political ideology begins to kind of define that.
Yeah.
If I grew up tribally, I would go one king, one ruler make absolute sense.
Yeah.
So if the king says this is the best, this must be the best.
Yes.
And that's what's right. If I grew up in an oppressed state and a really loudmouth person with lots of charisma came to power and said, we are an Aryan race, I may go, well, that's the best. I have to recognize I've grown up in the West in a democratic system and have a political ideology that dictates what I think is the best moral way.
Yeah. And I mean, it's so many things you've said that are interesting, but it's like, because we believe democracy potentially is the best model in a fallen state, in a fallen world, is it the best model in a country that has only ever been used to authoritarian rule? Can democracy really work, or does it give way for corruption on a much bigger scale? Because rather than just having one corrupt guy at the top, you've got 100.
Yeah.
I don't know.
So it's really interesting. So growing up, I grew up in South Africa, and kind of that's
did
where I come from.
You're South African?
What? I'm from South Africa?
I thought you were an oligarch. I thought you were Russian.
Oh, no, I'm a South African oligarch. The problem is
Russian Orthodox priest.
Our South African oligarchs have very little impact on the world scale, so no one cares.
Pistorius. He made a difference, didn't he?
I mean,
he didn't have a leg to stand on. That.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
all right.
Okay.
Well, Fire Mountain is taking it. And Thabo Mbeki, two presidents ago now, he made a speech. He did a whole series of speaking, really centered around this idea of African Renaissance and a revival of African understanding of the world within Africa. And he had this interesting thing where he said Africans need to stop looking to the West for solutions, and Africans need to begin to find African solutions to African problems. Really kind of recognizing that there's a lot of tribalism, there's a lot of tribal ideology that underpins a lot of thinking. And so even some of the conflict internally in South Africa is because this tribe won't be led by this tribe. And so there's a lot of that underpinning it. And so I don't know, can an authoritarian country that's always run in that way ever become truly democratic, and will it work? I don't know. What I want to say is yes, but I know that that's way more ideological, because democracy is based and founded on being educated. You have to be able to wrestle through multiple ideas to be able to make a thing. And I'm not saying uneducated people can't be democratic, but I do think, growing up in South Africa, I was sitting there thinking, if someone came to me and I'm living rurally and I'm a subsistence farmer and it's all I've known, and I use the sun to get up, and none of these things are bad in and of themselves, and says, I will give you free land, I'm voting for that person.
Yes.
I'm not cared about what crimes happening in the city or what your war theology, your war kind of ideas and ideology and how you would practice. I don't care. That's what I'm going to get. Where democracy seems to be built on this premise that you're going to investigate, look into, and then decide what the best way is.
Do you think that's why democracy is under fire in the West? Because as generally the public is more ignorant or more indifferent.
Yeah.
Less bothered about, like, I was thinking about the COVID measures and stuff. Like, I know many people who watch this will think they were all legit and good, but I'm surprised by how easily so many of our basic freedoms were taken from us, and how easy we were willing to be turned over in that way.
Yeah.
That, like, would another generation not have allowed that to happen? Would another generation say, no, this is my basic right, I can see my mum and dad for a barbecue if I want, in the no one should have that right to do that.
Yeah.
But actually, ignorance and fear means that you can be pickpocketed in broad daylight,
Yeah.
of these things.
I think that, I mean, potentially, I wonder if apathy is a bigger role in the West than we really recognize. Like, when you look at the voting, like, we live in a time where you have the right to vote people in to rule over you, and yet voting, if it breaks 50%, people are like, great voter turnout. And you're like, but also what you're saying is 50% of the country actually don't give one about who rules them, what those laws are, what they could be.
Yeah.
And even inside of that, you speak to people and you go, why do you think what you think? Why did you vote for these people?
Yeah.
And it's like, obviously, because either I live here, I've grown up here, or this is what I've always done. And it's like, so you don't even get what's going on.
Yeah, and I think, like, what I was thinking was what you were saying about the South African farmer, whose world is only as big as the footprint of the land he owns.
Yeah.
And that the seasons that come and go, who says, I don't care what they're doing in Cape Town, this is how it affects me. I think we're more like that now.
Yeah.
I think people aren't voting for a healthier society based on many things, how we protect young life, how we, the criminal system, or our economy. They're literally thinking about their world and voting what's best for them rather than what's best for society as a whole.
Yeah.
Because I think we're more consumeristic, we're more selfish, and actually we're more ignorant. So actually, if you can make a compelling case that speaks to how I'm going to benefit, screw Joe Bloggs down the road who's going to be, harmed by the legislation you're going to bring in. Like, we're now at a point, that's where I think democracy fails, is the fact that, like, and I don't think there's a better option, but I guess ultimately, if God was going to, what would Jesus do in terms of how would he establish governance? And what would you say to that? Like, and don't say theocracy, because obviously it would be a God ruling a land. That's what we all want. But actually in the Old Testament we see that God ruled through, like, Moses, the people of God. God ruled through kings like David. No, I say you can't say theocracy. That's a horrendous thing to say. Obviously, that's the ideal. That's what heaven looks like.
It's the easiest answer to give.
It's the easiest answer on earth. But, like, would God's ideal be a godly king over the people, or a people governing people in terms of democracy?
Yeah. So I know that this is probably where we would split and part ways. I don't think that we should have church or Christian-orientated driven values at the heart of our government.
Okay.
And that's a big statement to make, and also to be someone who works in church. So let me just clarify quickly.
Well, I've already said, maybe Putin's a good guy.
Yeah. So this is, we're basically, luckily, we've gone off the rails. What I mean by that is I think that people should democratically be allowed to choose who rules them. Mm-hmm. And I think inside of that, the question I'm asking is, if I wasn't a person of faith, what kind of a society would I want to live in?
Yes.
I think church should be church, and I think church should act like church in society. It should speak into issues that it needs to speak into. It should stand up for the rights of things it needs to stand up for, and it should stand against things that it needs to stand against. Mm-hmm. But I'm not too sure if that stuff should be legislated and made into law. Mm-hmm. I think society has to go, what is the best way for society to exist? So at a push, if you said to me, I want to live in a society where there is freedom of speech, which also means I recognize that for me to be able to talk about my faith and what I think are problems, someone has to be able to get up and talk about what they think is right for them and speak against my faith. Yeah. And so I want to live in that society, but I'm not too sure that freedom of speech is an embedded value in the Bible.
Okay. Yeah.
So already I'm at odds with that. I want to live in a society where people are protected. I want to live in a society where women have the freedom to choose what to do with their bodies. I want to live in a society. But I also want to then have the right to be able to speak about my view on that from a Christian's point of view, what I believe as Christians we should do. I'm just not convinced those things should be legislated. I want to live in a society that is protecting itself and that is prepared to go to war. But then I want to be able to speak about my view on what that should look like, what I think war is.
Yeah.
And I'm not too sure that that should be legislated. And so for me, I want the democratic process to exist because I want society to go, this is what we think the best version of a society can be.
Yeah.
And inside of that, I do think God appoints people as ruler. I can't get away from that. I totally believe it. Like right now, I have to affirm God knew Boris Johnson was going to be prime minister, no matter what I think about him.
Yeah.
And so there needs to be an honoring inside of that. I should be praying for him.
Yeah.
But also, because I'm living in a democratic, free society, I want the ability to go, I disagree with this, I disagree with this.
Yeah.
I think this, and this, and this. So I don't know if that kind of makes any
sense.
sense.
No, it does. I mean, I think from my understanding of British history, I would say like back to the days of Saxons, like 1,000+ years ago, society was built on this trifecta of a healthy church, a healthy kingship and government, and a healthy family. And there was this trifecta of things that had their clear lanes, that definitely spoke into one another's realm, but the church wasn't the government, and the church wasn't the family. And the family wasn't the church, and the family wasn't the government, and the government wasn't the church, and the government wasn't the family. Which meant that there was a measure of responsibility for each faction, if you like. So where we go wrong is when the church look to the government for help.
Yeah.
No, we're the church. So we can shape things that are happening in the world. We should petition, protest, and we should voice our thing. And if the family start looking to the government for intervention, then again, what we're doing is we're inviting overreach for something that the government isn't established to do. So, and I think that's probably a healthier model. So I would concede to this idea that we don't want blurry kind of lines. Like the idea that families, for example, in Sunny Hill, we should support, but the moment that we try to do the job of what only a family can do is the moment where the family is undermined and all of a sudden parents absolve their responsibilities to raise their kids and train their kids for godliness. Yeah. No, that's the parents' job, not the church's job. That's your job. That's my job. And the church may support and facilitate, but the moment that we hand that responsibility over to the government, so even our kids' education, that's why I struggle a little bit with our education system, because in many ways parents absolve the responsibility of education to the state.
Yeah.
And then we're confused why so many kids leave the church in droves when they hit university age, because actually what we haven't done is going, yes, we recognise that the government do offer free education, and that's brilliant, that's a real blessing, but it's going to supplement what I'm doing. I'm going to make sure that the primary voice in my child's life is me and Louise. Yeah. And I think that the moment that we absolve responsibility from one of these areas, there's a crumbling and erosion of society that I think is for the detriment of everyone. Yeah. The government becomes weaker, the church becomes weaker, and the family unit becomes weaker.
Yeah. And I wonder if that's where the kind of crumbling of things start to happen. Christians spend a huge amount of time trying to convince other Christians of the right political party to vote for. Mm-hmm. The right school to send your child to, the right educational model your child should be in, because kind of it's like going, if we get that right, hey, we're all good. Yes. We don't need to do a whole lot. Rather than going, okay, in my household, this is what I need to do. Yep. Actually, as a Christian, this is how I need to respond. Yep. And then as a citizen, this is what I think the best is for the society as I look around it to exist inside of. Yes. And I think that does give freedom for people to go, I do think this is a better person to be running society because I do think these are core issues. Yes. But what I do think is single point issues, especially maybe more in America than in the UK, but I'm not really convinced of that. But single point issues have become like the markers. If you're a Christian, you better vote for this. Because if you don't, you should question whether you're a Christian, rather than if you're the church, you should really stand up against these things and for these things. Because that's what we're there to do.
But surely, and I totally understand what you're saying, but surely if if I should stand for that as the church, I should also stand for that as a citizen, right? Ultimately.
So I'm that's probably what I'm not convinced.
Well,
of.
I guess that's the thing where what you don't want to do is take 3 hot topics and then pass all manner of crazy just to support those hot topic issues that you are that you've been it's been ingrained into you that we die in the pit of these things.
And this kind of raises the Ukraine question and war for me, because I'm trying to go, as a society, do I think we should defend the Ukraine?
Yeah.
I do.
Yeah.
Do I think we should be doing economic sanctions? I'm not too sure what good they will do, but I do think we should do something. And ultimately, do I think we should send troops in if needs be? I probably do think that.
Yeah, okay.
But as a Christian,
Yeah.
should I be neutral? Should I be
as
both
in
going...
What, pacifist?
Well, I'm looking and going, kind of pacifist. Is it pacifism? I'm not too sure if that's what I'm thinking, but I'm going, there are atrocities that are going to be committed against people in the Ukraine because of what's going on.
Yeah.
But there's also going to be atrocities committed against, like, just innocent people in Russia because of what's going on, and maybe even wider than that, across the globe, as a kind of a new Russian racism maybe begins to emerge.
Okay.
And actually, as Christians, like, we should be standing against that.
Yes.
When we begin to see it happening in our workplace, or, down at the shop, where people begin to go, I won't, you're whatever. I don't know what it could look like, but how we respond well as Christians inside of that, while also on the flip side, from my point of view, is going, I believe in democracy. I believe that the Ukraine as a sovereign, free state should choose how to run and elect who leads them, and no one should come in and take that over. I just think that it's wrong.
Yeah.
So how to kind of marry these two things together, I'm not too sure.
Yeah, I mean, okay, so let's just push back on that.
Yeah.
Let's just go back to World War II when Germany invaded Poland.
Yeah.
Right. Let's just say that the world the West was living a revival reality.
Yeah.
So there was more Christians in America and the UK, and their faith led them to be neutral in war. Then what we would have been doing was giving Hitler a free pass to invade every country without any support of.
Yeah.
So I guess in what you're saying is, are you saying that and I know it's hard when you push the extremes, but I think it's helpful to kind of really drive you to a point of opinion, are you saying if that was the case, it would be better that we just pray and don't pick up arms and, just assume that God's will be done, whatever that may be? Or would you not be saying actually the most righteous thing we can do is to destroy anything that is obviously anti-Semitic, anti-Jew, obviously anti-Christian, anti-everything really, apart from German Aryan blood or whatever.
Yeah.
What would you say in that situation if you push? I know you're not saying. I know you're not committing to that.
Yeah.
But if you were to push that viewpoint to the nth degree and say Christians shouldn't be involved, if most of the West was Christian, then we couldn't really speak into any kind of global conflict, right?
Yeah. So I would probably end up moving down the route that Dietrich Bonhoeffer did, who lived in Germany at the time of World War II and joined a movement to plot to assassinate Hitler. And we would have to explain that. I think if they were successful, we would have statues of Dietrich Bonhoeffer around places, and he's a great theologian, and we would have to explain to people why.
Well, help me understand that. So Bonhoeffer was plotting the assassination of
Germany,
the literally Prime Minister,
of
the Chancellor of Germany.
He was plotting the assassination of Hitler during World War II, and before they had chance to go ahead and do it, he was arrested, put into a concentration camp, and out of his he was killed in the concentration camp a week before the concentration camp was freed.
I mean, but I didn't know this, but Bonhoeffer then, he is like one of the most well-respected theologians and Christian thinkers of the last 100 years.
Yeah.
And so a godly guy, a well-versed guy, plotting the murder of somebody.
Yeah.
That seems like
so this is where
counterintuitive.
It does. I think it is counterintuitive, and this is where I think the political ideology and kind of internal Christian theological perspective and faith that one carries have to collide in the individual, and they have to come to a consensus in themselves. Bonhoeffer's writing at the time was looking ahead and going, I can see the atrocities that are going to occur, and so the right thing for Christians to do is to
So the greater
remove-
good.
is to remove the evil. Now, there's an interesting guy. His name's Norman Geisler, and he's an interesting read. He's a philosopher, theologian, trying to unpick these ethical situations. And he says the mistake we make as Christians is we spend our lives talking about the lesser of two evils,
Okay.
and we need to start to go, what's the greater good? And he refers to various passages in the Bible where he goes, when the Egyptians were plotting to kill all of the boys, and Moses' mom hides him away, and there's other Egyptian parents who hide away their children,
Yeah.
God comes to those women and he commends them for lying. He says, you have done a good thing.
Gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
So he goes,
That's
what
interesting.
they chose is the greater good, and God commends them for doing the greater good in that situation. That's kind of, for me, probably where I rest in my head, is going, okay, right now, with what's going on in the world, the craziness that's working out with Ukraine, Russia kind of invading into it, spreading way beyond what they said they were doing as a peacekeeping mission, like from what I've read.
Yeah.
Okay, as Christians, what's the greater good here?
I think the hardship with that question is, and I like your answer, I think it's good, is like the greater good is relative.
Yeah.
The greater good from your perspective is different from Putin's greater good.
Yeah.
And the greater good from your perspective is an assemblance of your upbringing, your culture, your heritage, the values that were ingrained into you as a child, the understanding you had as what's good and what's bad. And obviously I'm not like one of these relative truth, postmodernism kind of thinkers.
Yeah, you're woke. You're woke.
I'm super woke. I'm woke, baby. But like, it's fair to say that like there's only one truth, and if we were going to give somebody the power to determine what the greater good is, like I just feel like that's too great a burden.
So it's interesting. When I was in South Africa, we had a American theologian come and teach us at Bible college for a semester.
Okay.
And obviously, growing up in South Africa, really violent, lots of really violent crime going on. Not the highest amount of crime in the world. Like there's a misconception, like there's lots of crime. It isn't. It's just the proportion of violent crime compared to other places. Actually, there's more crime in London than there is in South Africa.
Okay. Really?
But the amount of violent crime is disproportionate. Like, you know, petty crime. There's so much petty crime in London that goes on.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of that in South Africa. It is pretty
Serious.
brutal when it happens. And so she asked the question, like going, okay, well, who would define the greater good? And theologically, what you should do. And her vibe is, well, if you went into these situations, you should find creative ways to love people in it.
Okay.
So when war breaks out, instead of there being violence, the Christian response is you must find a creative way to love your enemy.
Mm-hmm.
And it caused an eruption in class because everybody was going, it's not going to happen. Like, it's not going to happen. With theological reasoning behind it, to kind of go, surely God would want me to be protecting my family first and foremost.
Yeah.
And so if you're coming in to harm my family, surely God's drive in me is to protect my family.
Yes.
And to make sure that I'm not going to try and find a creative, loving way to give you a hug if it's between you or my family.
Yeah.
Like, I'm choosing my family.
Yes.
And there was massive debate about it, which kind of lends into what you're saying. It does speak into upbringing, background, understanding, and worldview, even to a point maybe value of human life, and then the theological frame that rests kind of behind it.
Yes.
And my kids asked me this question. They said, if conscription came out, like they're quite young, they didn't use the word conscription, but they said, if like in World War II, the government went, we need more soldiers now.
Yeah.
You must go fight. What would I do?
Yes.
Would I choose to go into war or not?
Yeah.
And probably my hunch is I would. I'm not sure I'd be a great soldier. I mean, look at this.
You could go in as a spy, as an oligarch.
I could go in as an oligarch. That's the whole thing. Or I can go in
a Russian
short
Orthodox
distance,
priest.
Very short distance fighter. 2 or 3 meters, I'm fine. But if it's a 100-meter run, that's the game. That's the game. But kind of asking the question is, would I go and fight? And I know that a big portion of Christians may go, no, would be conscientious objectors.
Yeah.
We wouldn't do it, I'm not too sure I would. I think I probably would go and fight, because I would go primarily protecting my family, first and foremost. Feels the most Christian thing I could do.
Yes.
Even if that's to the detriment of someone else who might also be doing the same thing. But a lot of that's also tied into my upbringing, my understanding of the world, my worldview, and everything else that's unfolded.
You see, right now, I don't think I would go and fight. I think...
But if they offered you a free trip to Australia, then would...
If Russia was invading Australia, I'd go and defend. I'd go and defend that bad boy. No, the reason being is, like, I think one of the things you fight for is you believe in the values and the ethos of the society that you are seeking to either preserve or advance, right?
Yeah.
And now I've been an outspoken critic on our government in recent times.
Yeah.
Not in a way to try to undermine, but in a way to, I guess, to bring clarity and awareness, I think.
Yeah.
Because I think sometimes we just roll over as Christians and just assume that everything we hear is the best thing. But I think, like, in recent times, I would say I'm pleased with the way the country's going and the way that now we're responding post-COVID. I'm pleased with that, although not everyone is. I'm quite content, and I feel like of all the Western civilizations, we're actually the most liberated, I think. And I think that's a brilliant... I'm really pleased by that. Like, when you look at what's happening in Canada, even Australia and America, I think, like, actually we are moving towards freedoms and what we have already. That said, I think the British values have never been so squiffy.
Okay.
And I think that our understanding of what a civilized society looks like has never been more off-kilter. So our views on gender, on our views of the sanctity of life, our views on marriage, our views on all these things... I wouldn't seek to defend those values with my life. I actually think that, like, we have become not just more liberal, but increasingly antichrist.
Yeah.
In the way we govern, and in the way that we educate, and in the way we exist. Is there a noise somewhere?
I can hear something. I don't know. Keep going. There is definitely...
Oh, it's me. It's my hand on the table.
No, it's not.
What is that?
Oh, it's the cleaners.
Oh, they're in, are they, today? Oh, okay, fine. We've got some cleaners in the building, so if you're wondering what that was about, basically we can hear some weird old noises, but there's some cleaners in the bin. Sounds like she's wrestling a dinosaur. He's wrestling a dinosaur.
It could be anything happening.
Okay, anyways, I'll carry on. Is that, like, to protect my family, yes, of course, but if the virtue of war is to go and defend the great British kind of existence and our values... then I just feel like it's hard to defend. Yeah. And actually, I think that becomes a problem. That said, like, would I go into all that? I would probably serve, but I'd seek to outwork my service in a way that meant I wasn't shooting or killing anyone. And I think there is a growing number of modern theologians, John Mark Homer, Preston Sprinkle, Grudem, people who are pacifists. Yeah. Who think that war is not an option for Christians. Yeah. And I think that's, historical theologians actually would have been the opposite. And I think it's kind of interesting that we're moving to more of a pacifism kind of ideology in church. But
Yeah, I think that it's really interesting. I mean, I was putting some thought around what would be some of the central values that I would hold to that would drive me to go to war. Mm-hmm. I think people being able, self-determination of people.
So you've really thought about this?
Yeah. People being able to actually choose who they want and how they want to be ruled, I think is of primary importance. Okay. I think the rights of the individual is of primary importance. And I think they can find expressions in different ways within society, but I do think people's individual rights are centrally important. And I feel like if you don't affirm individual rights, you can't affirm to talk against stuff you want to. Okay. And then kind of the free world value. And what I mean by free world isn't like an American Western value. I mean free trade, freedom of speech, freedom of expression, all of those basic freedoms that I think at the West now we've become so used to and so apathetic in that we don't even see them as this. It's
we see them as a right.
Yeah, like as a right rather than wow, like it's a gift. People fought and died for us to be able to do these. Yeah. And I think that those things kind of drive me to go. That I would go to war for that, to defend that.
Interesting.
Even though I may not like how they're taking expression in society, I know that I can't affirm those as important values. Yeah. and then go, but I also then want to dictate how they should look in outworking.
Yes.
Like I have to go, if I'm for this freedom that people can use and express and have, half the time they're going to do things that I go, I don't know if your freedoms should allow you to do that.
Yes.
But I have to affirm that the freedom is what's really important.
Yes.
So you can, and that gives me the freedom then as a Christian to talk against that.
Yeah.
So I think that there are some things that I would go to war for even now, because I don't know if I agree with an authoritarian push coming in to subjugate a whole group of people.
Yes.
And say, nah, we don't like it. And so, I think it's kind of, I was listening to this reporter, and she said this interesting thing. She said, Putin needs to defeat the Ukraine, because if democracy works in the Ukraine, it will show the rest of Russia that democracy can actually work.
Okay.
And he can't afford for democracy to be seen to work in a country that's so closely aligned to how he is, to Russia. Yeah. Because then he will lose the authoritarian power he has and controlled in Russia. Yeah,
it's like the North and South Korea divide, isn't it? Democracy in one, prosperity, flourishing, more than enough, Christian, kingdom expansion. Like, maybe the kingdom works easier in a democracy, because that would be evidenced, I think, by those things. But I was reading this morning, turn to the Bible, so my Bible just fell apart. Fair enough. But just about the end times. Yeah. Jesus speaking in Matthew 24, and it's subtitled Signs of the End of the Age. And he says, watch out that no one deceives you, for many will come in my name claiming I am the Christ, and will deceive many. I think that's kind of interesting. You will hear of wars and rumour of wars, but see to it that you are not alarmed. Such things must happen, but the end is still to come. Nation will rise against nation and kingdom against kingdom, and there will be famines and earthquakes in various places. All these are the beginning of birth pains. Yeah. And actually in the King James Version, and I haven't looked at the Greek yet, but I will do later today, it actually says the word pestilences as well, like plagues. Yeah. And I think, wow, it feels like, we often talk about the fact that we live in like an apocalyptic reality, but obviously with the last 2 years of the pandemic, obviously a pestilence of epic proportions, one that we've never seen before in our lifetime, war now on the doorstep, like one that we've never seen in our lifetime. Like, it's always been a distant war in the Middle East, and it's been a hidden enemy, isn't it? That's what we've been told, that sleeper cells, terrorists and all that kind of waiting to rear their head. But when you really unpick it, there's largely an oil dispute mostly. And I think the thing for me is as we try to grapple with this and try to ground our thinking in it, I think what the encouragement I find the most helpful is, but see that you are not alarmed. Yeah. See to it that you're not alarmed. So and I find that interesting, because actually, Dom and Richard of Sunny Hill in Poole in Dorset, small fry, we can't influence or change what's happening in the world. We can pray for sure, and that's how we're going to respond as a church. We're going to pray. We've got a prayer meeting tonight at 6 till 7 at Lounge 1. It's going to just be an informal time where we just give space for people to pray and just bring this stuff to God. But all of these things we can't determine, but it does seem our anxiety levels we can determine. Yeah. The amount that we allow this stuff to rob us of our peace and our joy. Our worry levels we can determine. Jesus says that, doesn't he, in the Gospel of Matthew earlier on? He says, do not worry. It's a command, it's like an instruction. It's like, try your best to not be worried. It's not that. It's like, do not worry. We can determine how we respond to this. And actually, Jesus says, these things will happen. These things must happen as time folds in. These are beginning birth pains. But see to it that you are not alarmed. Yeah. And I think I found... I've known that verse obviously for years. I've been a Christian for years. But I think all of the kind of insight, the picture that Jesus gives to this kind of apocalyptic reality, I feel has never been more apparent than what we're experiencing now. Plagues, wars, distress, famines, or earthquake, weird natural disasters happening. We're in the last days, and a preacher will have been able to have said that for the last 1,000 years. We are in the last days. In the context of eternity, we are in the last days. But I think what all this leads to is, in my opinion, I think in some instances a turning away because in this passage it talks about don't let the love of many will grow cold, and I've talked about that a little bit this morning at Paul Campus. But ultimately, I think also a great turning back. I think a great turning to God. I do believe in an end time harvest, and I think that in a Western civilized society where there's consumerism, entitlement, and riches, and in the top 1%, it's much harder for people to see the need for God in that context.
Yeah.
As Jesus says, it's harder for a rich man to go through the eye of a needle. It's easier for a camel to go through an eye of a needle than it is for a rich man to enter the kingdom of God. Why? Because comfort, riches, and entitlement actually prevent our ability to understand our utter need before God. Whereas what we're seeing now is the shaking of kingdoms of earth, governments and societies that I think lead to a waking up and an awareness of the vulnerability and the fragility of everything we've known and loved. And I think to that end, that my two encouragements to the church would be, don't be alarmed, first of all. And the second thing is, let's pray. The weapons we have are spiritual weapons to demolish strongholds. So we do want to come against ungodly antichrist agendas, but ultimately know that these things must happen at the end of time, because I think God wants to use them to bring about people for himself.
Yeah.
I don't know whether you got any thoughts on that, Richard.
Yeah. When I've been thinking about it and going, okay, God, what is the right Christian response? And I totally agree with everything you're saying. And I went to Matthew 5 and I was thinking about, blessed are the peacemakers, for they'll be called the children of God. And I thought, well, God, are you saying that we should all get on a plane and fly to the Ukraine and be like, no, stop
here,
peace?
Yeah.
And I was going, actually, in our situations now, in the worlds we live in our places and spheres of influence we carry, we need to become people who in conversations are peacemakers.
Yeah.
Because I think there'll be lots of anti-Russian sentiments, lots of pro-Ukrainians, anti-Ukrainians, anti-European bloc, Brexit will all these things are going to play in. Yeah. And how we define ourselves as being children of God is to be in the middle of that and be peacemakers.
Great.
We don't need to get on a plane and fly to the Ukraine tomorrow. And maybe God called some people to do that. I don't know. But for me, it does feel like there's a moment for church now to have to be church.
Yeah, it's good.
Which is talking peace.
Yeah.
Peace with our colleagues at work, peace in our school environments, peace with other people, and going, actually, there are problems and we don't fully understand the conflicts. And none of us are going to know what Putin thinks, what Biden's thinking, what Boris Johnson's thinking. We don't have access to all the information they do. We don't know what's driving them. And we can all make our own conclusions. And I don't think that that's unhealthy and that should be discussed and it should be open. But ultimately, we should be talking peace into the situations.
Yeah, that's good.
We can't hate people because of this. We can't hate someone else because their ideology is different to us. We need to be peacemakers. And in that, people will go, that's the children of God. That's the church.
Yes.
Because they're being peacemakers. And so I totally agree with you. I think we need to pray. We need to not be overcome with worry and fear and anxiety and hide away. But we need to be the people who step up and go, you know what? Peace. We're going to bring peace. We're going to bring peace. So, I totally agree.
I mean, it's a huge issue and one that we could talk the rest of the day and only get more confused and whatever about it. But I think that ultimately we've got to trust in the sovereignty and goodness of God.
Yeah.
And we have to live with an eternal perspective, don't we? We have to go, this is not it. We live in a fallen world. This is birthing pains. And in many ways, I think that whilst we shouldn't just accept our situation, we should pray. And in whatever cases, petition, whatever we need to do. And depending on your theology, fight.
Yeah.
But for sure, I think that ultimately, the church's job remains the same.
Yeah. Agreed.
Glorify God and expand the kingdom on earth. And so that's what we do.
Agreed. And obviously, today's episode may have felt a bit heavier than others. And we would encourage you, we would love to hear your thoughts about what's going on. Please email firemountain@sunnyhill.church or drop them into the comments. We'd love to pick up some of your own thinking and feelings, how you see the world, how you see what's playing out right now, and even maybe some of the struggles you're carrying in it, because we'd love to be able to share our ignorant opinions about those things. But beyond that, we would push you. The Bible encourages us to pray.
Yeah.
Prayer moves the hand that moves the world. And when we look around and go, God, we just don't know what's going on. We don't know what to do.
Yeah.
Prayer is the best single response that the
Yeah.
church can do.
Absolutely. So that's what we'll do.
Yeah.
And we're going to close with a song, Sea of Victory, which I think
Yeah.
is apt. And I think obviously this doesn't just speak to our physical victories on earth, it speaks to the spiritual victory.
Yeah.
And the reason that we can be assured of the victory is because Jesus has already won the victory for us. And so we're going to use this song as a way of closing our time together today. So use it as your response. You know, we've talked a lot. Maybe it hasn't made sense. Maybe it's confused you more. But either way, we want to encourage you to put your eyes on Jesus today and not be alarmed at the situation.
Yeah.
Awesome.
The weapon may be formed, but it won't prosper.
Will be an hour and 20 after the song.
When the darkness falls, it won't prevail. 'Cause the God I serve knows only how to triumph. And my God will never fail. My God will never fail. And I'm gonna see a victory. I'm gonna see a victory. For the battle belongs to you, Lord. I'm gonna see your victory. I'm gonna see your victory. For the battle belongs to you, Lord. There's power in the mighty name of Jesus. Every war he wages, he will win. I'm not backing down.